Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Christoph Aschauer. I'm working for LogPoint in LogPoint's business unit, LogPoint for SAP. This session is about the detection and analysis of unauthorized access to sensitive personal data in an SAP system. Let me first introduce LogPoint as a SIEM vendor. LogPoint is a software vendor based in Copenhagen, Denmark, creating a SIEM solution called LogPoint. SIEM is short for Security Information and Event Management. What ERP means for finance departments or a customer relationship management means for sales, a SIEM system means for IT security. And SIEM is the state-of-the-art centerpiece of an IT security monitoring provided in Cyber Defense Center, Security Operations Center, or Managed Security Services. But SIEM is more than just cybersecurity. It can be also used for compliance, IT operations, and business analytics. Now let me explain and introduce LogPoint for SAP. In a SIEM system, usually all kinds of security and network devices are monitored. You have logs of firewalls, endpoint security devices, or web and email gateways in a SIEM system for monitoring. Even though SAP is probably the most important asset of an organization, containing all kinds of intellectual property of the organization, it is usually not part of the central monitoring in SIEM. The reason for that is SAP is just not sending security relevant information to a SIEM system. Now, with the help of our knowledge in SIEM and SAP, we have worked on a bridging technology that integrates SAP into SIEM systems. With LogPoint for SAP, we manage that integration. We extract all kinds of security, audit, and compliance relevant information of an SAP system and send the data to the SIEM. In SIEM, we provide the SAP Security Intelligence, that is a set of rules that listens to the incoming SAP information and analyzes the data. The major benefit monitoring SAP in a SIEM solution is not just that a machine like a SIEM solution can be used for that purpose and listen to all kinds of incoming SAP events, but the SAP data can then be cross-correlated with all other data that is usually contained in a SIEM system. For example, a download of SAP information can be just a very usual and normal activity in an SAP system. But when the data then shortly after gets sent by the same laptop, computer, or workstation that works with the SAP system out to a private email account, this is definitely something that needs to be detected and alerted. And this is only possible in SIEM, where you have the holistic view about SAP and the entire IT security, classic IT security information. Let's come to the case of today's session. A typical case that we get reported by customers, have been reported by customers, or that SAP customers have concerns about, is the access and the misuse of personal data. In this case, there has been an access to salary information or pension payments, and the data got actually downloaded and printed out and was distributed in coffee kitchens or coffee places in that organization. And you can imagine how quickly and far this information distributes among employees. The challenge that the SAP customers are in usually is then a severe GDPR compliance issue. And after the fact, forensic analysis starts, and the questions are, when did the access happen and when did the printout happen? Who is and was authorized to access the data? And who had potentially temporary access to that data via so-called firefighter or maintenance users in an SAP system with high privileges, and who finally access the data in the system. There is also an SAP security challenge these organizations are in. The questions are, what SAP logs are actually monitoring such access? Are these logs then still available? And where is this or other personal data stored in an SAP system? And how is the access to such data possible by all means? And if not available, how to configure SAP for such monitoring? Well, looking at the SAP logging infrastructure, there are a few logs in SAP, of course, available. First of all, there is the SAP Security Audit Log. That's a reasonable log, but unfortunately for the monitoring of such activity, it is too high level, and it is not logging explicitly enough the access to certain data. And usually it's not activated entirely, like for all audit classes or all possible activities for all users in the landscape. There is another log source that's called SAP STAD data. That's the transaction log, a transaction log for all users in the system that is available. But again, and unfortunately, it is too high level for detecting such activities. And then there is a database audit trail available that logs database layer access via, for example, the SAP HANA cockpit or other database administrator tools. Usually, only database administrators have access directly to the database. And the database audit trail logs the access to sensitive database tables. But again, here, it is missing the information about the field level access to that data. Well, there is a way out, and there is another log source available in SAP that's called the SAP Read Access Log. This is a very powerful log with all necessary details available to actually detect access to personal data in an SAP system as it logs access on a database field level. The downside of this log is that first, it requires extensive configuration. The questions are how to configure this read access log, what to configure, and where is all kinds of personal related data stored in an SAP system, and then what is GDPR relevant. And the other topic is how to manage and monitor actually the logs. The topics that are relevant is then log retention, the log analysis, and the automated monitoring of these read access logs. Well, in LogPoint, we took on these issues and challenges and worked on a serious added value for our customers and SAP customers. Let's start with the management and the monitoring of logs, and then go to the extensive configuration for the read access log. Well, the solution out is that SAP needs to be monitored in a SIEM, and all relevant information needs to be sent to a SIEM system. With the help of LogPoint for SAP, we continuously extract and transfer the SAP read access log information into the SIEM. In the SIEM, the automated analysis of SAP read access log information is possible and available. And what the SIEM does in addition is actually providing the log management of SAP data. It is the storage of the read access log, for example, for multiple months and years even. And even though the data might be quite old, for an after-the-fact analysis, a SIEM system provides a very powerful and high-performant capability to actually browse the data and search through millions of events. The second aspect is our value proposition with regards to the configuration of the read access log. I mentioned before that, first of all, the read access log needs to be configured in order to produce logs. Now in LogPoint for SAP, we have worked on a deployable configuration that logs or enables the read access log to log access to more than 450 database table fields that are stored in more than 200 database tables and accessible via more than 70 transaction codes. We achieve the logging of the read access log, which protocols the access to personal HR data or customer data or bank data and other data in an SAP system. With our LogPoint for SAP software, we can then extract the log information and forward the data to the SIEM for further inspection and automated monitoring in the SIEM. What do we cover in terms of configuration in the read access log? Today, we cover the SAP modules, for example, the HR systems or human capital management systems, sales and distribution, and material management, to cover access to employee data, applicant data, customer data, vendor data, bank data, and more. And the types of access that we monitor is transaction code-based access and also generic database table access in an SAP system. And other types of access means other read access log channels are on our roadmap. For example, the access via remote function calls, or web UI-based access to an SAP system. Well, this is how configuration then looks like in an SAP system with regards to the read access log. We have provided all kinds of configuration like logging purposes, log domains, the recordings, and the configuration. And all that is available via the STMS transport, an STMS transport import. That's software or configuration deployment in an SAP system. This is how log analysis looks like in SAP using the SAP Read Access Log Monitor. Unfortunately, SAP missed to provide all kinds of relevant filters for that read access log. And the means or the way you use that read access log is really a manual log inspection. So you need to click on the right-hand side, you see the header lines of such logs, and then you get details provided in the screen below. So it's really manual activity, and unfortunately, no automated alerts are possible. With LogPoint, that's a different story. In LogPoint, we are able to detect the access of personal data in an SAP system in an automated way. Here, there's a use case described about the suspicious access by unauthorized user groups. These are high privileged accounts like the maintenance user, firefighter user. And in the graphic, you see in the diagram, starting from the left-hand side, that on a certain SAP system ID in an certain SAP client, a user called Firefight accessed the transaction P820 to access finally multiple records of personnel numbers and their details. And the accessed fields have been address data or date of birth, annual salary, or a bank account. And you can imagine that this query that visualizes the data can be just transferred into an alert in LogPoint that will then trigger whenever the access of such a user account happens to that personal data, like an annual salary field. Another use case for monitoring is whenever one account is accessing multiple other accounts' details. And here in the screen, you see that an administrator account was actually accessing multiple other personnel numbers details in an SAP system. Just another way of looking into the data when there is an excessive access of data. And this can be then, of course, transferred to, let's say, data about customer relationship, management information, or vendor or supplier information, and is extremely important and always relevant, of course, when people leave or enter organizations. The log analysis looks completely different also in LogPoint. There's a high performance and user-friendly log analysis possible. The screen shows a so-called search template in LogPoint. On the right-hand side, you see parameters, input fields that can be used to browse the data, the read access log data. So we have the system ID available, the SAP client, a certain user, but also logging purposes or log context information that can be filtered or used to filter the data. And even the accessed field can be used to browse the data. So in this diagram, we see a list of screens that have been accessed by certain users. Here we have, again, the SAP system ID and the client and the user that accessed personal numbers, multiple personal number records, and the screens that have been used were the HR master data screen display, or a display of personal data, a display of bank details, and the display of addresses. And then you can get more granular by using the field names that have been accessed. And when I enter the accessed field that you see on the right-hand side, the technical name of that field, annual salary, I can filter the data and then detect that, again, a firefighter account has accessed multiple log context personnel number and multiple personnel numbers records, and was accessing actually the annual salary information. And here you can see that the detection is actually possible in an automated way, as incidents or alerts can be set up, alert rules can be set up in the LogPoint system to detect or trigger whenever the access to personal data, like an annual salary field, happens. And also with regards to analysis of that read access log, we provide the user interfaces like search templates to easily browse all kinds of read access log information. I hope you enjoyed the session, and thank you very much for your attention.
Are there any questions remaining?
Yes, I have one question. Do you actually have coverage for medical environment of SAP?
It's a very good question, and we're actually are currently working on it. As we see, of course, also this request, and I mean, hospitals are having the patient's data, right? That can be accessed or that needs to be protected. So this is very relevant. It's just that hospitals use a special industry solution of SAP.
Yeah, that would be, actually we're using the standard SAP in our environment, but we are using an add-on by Siemens Nausanne, the ES Hamid, which is not specifically a dedicated SAP. It's an extra solution which you run within the SAP environment. Well, maybe we can find a mutual agreeable solution to implementing, supporting that. We'll take the license for free and you can test with us. How about that? No, just kidding. But I think we should. Hey, I will not fight. I will not fight. If you have to coerce me, I'll take it for free, okay? No, I think that we could provide sufficiently diverse environments in which it's possible to apply various aspects of the Agile SI platform for monitoring SAP with its various subs, flavors, whatevers. So,
of course, I mean, we should work together on this topic, and we're willing to work on some content for that. I mean, we have an entire team that is currently working on that configuration of an SAP system. But as I mentioned, I mean, we're now targeting this ISH, right? Industry solution. for health, right, or healthcare, and we're happy to have a deeper dialogue on that. It's definitely possible that we create some configuration for you in that ESR or ISH module. So I'm pretty sure. As I said, there is a team that works on that configuration, and other modules are of course possible. But we haven't touched it so far. But just because also of our customer base, right, and the relevance of SAP systems in healthcare and hospitals, it is important that we target this.
What's your timeline for that? Because I personally have a tight goal. I'd love to have something in place by the end of this year. Probably this is far too much optimism for the real life experience. I know how software development and all that stuff works.
In any case, I mean, we can start right in slices or bits or pieces, right? So I would be happy to understand your requirements first in details, and then we can think of how we or analyze and see how much it would be, right? And then you can take it from our previous name, Agile SI. So we can be very agile when it comes to customer requirements. So let's have a conversation. Any more questions?
I can just add to some things. I'm a colleague to Christoph, Enterprise Account Manager at LogPoint in Sweden. So really interesting dialogue here at the end regarding the healthcare systems and SAP. And one thing that LogPoint is doing, not for SAP, but for other healthcare systems and journaling systems in Sweden, for example, is that we're developing something that is called applied analytics. So it's an add-on feature to the core SIEM that we are offering, right? Which basically means that it's a means of getting an understanding of how patient data is being accessed by whom and how and from where, for example, and providing that detailed information in a much simpler format for a nurse, for example, or another non-IT staff. That is something that we already do. It's not related to SAP per se, but I think since we're already doing things for healthcare systems at LogPoint, I think there is probably maybe some overlapping discussions that could be had internally between the SAP teams and the applied analytics teams to see what we could do in terms of use cases, for example, and that sort of thing. So
that's actually something that we would very much need, not necessarily for the layman, but very much more for specific questions concerning GDPR. Accessing the patient's data is subject to very, very high standards, especially considering the recent, let's say, step up of the privacy protection. And I'm speaking in this case for Germany specifically. The access to the patient's files is not something which can be handled lightly. It's actually not even permitted for doctors in the same department to access the data sets of the patients if they are not related or involved in treatment of that patient. I mean, one example would be we had it's not medical data in specific, but it also relates to that. There's a pop singer in Schlager in Germany who was sick in Hamburg. She went to the hospital, and after a review, the police alone determined there were 50 plus access logged to her specific data entries. Now, nobody can tell me that she ran 50 red lights at the same time while she was at the hospital. Nobody can tell me she was drunk or bashing in windows or running through the city naked. I don't know what the arguments could be for that.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
No.
And obviously, accessing the personal files, in this case, simply the personal information about this artist being a person of public interest, was not permissible. It was not acceptable. It was prohibited. And this is actually rather, looking at it from the human point of view, it's an understandable thing, but nonetheless, it's actually very, very dangerous, because let's roll out the whole situation, having, for example, a politician or other persons of importance in your hospital, in your facility, and you have people in-house who are not permitted to access those files, but having the possibility to access them, stumbling over them by accident, and, for example, just mentioning that, let's say, as a side remark to somebody else. Now, if that's a CEO of a young fledgling company, which is on the verge of taking the charts, sort of, and everyone drops the stock as if they were hot potatoes, that the damage is done. So we need something that permits us not only to audit access, not only to prevent access, but also to, let's say, in a forensically, but also data protection-wise, soundly method, verify upon request how, when, and who was capable of accessing a patient's specific file at a given time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Christoph, for an amazing presentation, as always, and really good and interesting conversations here at the end. So
thank you so much. Yeah,
have a nice evening,
Really
guys.
great. I'll stay online if there are any more questions, but thank you very much for that very valuable discussion. It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your attention.